Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Welcome back into the Steve Jones Show, News Radio 1070 WKOK. You can find us at stevejonesshow.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at SteveJonesPSU. And don't forget our shows are available as a podcast. After we go live, we drop them on Google Play and iTunes and the Apple Podcast app. If you listen to us on iTunes, don't hesitate to leave us a review. You can check out all the great interviews that we are replaying this week that we've had on over the past year since Steve is enjoying a very well-deserved vacation. Steve's back with us next Tuesday from the Sunbury Motors Studio. Sunbury Motors, Ford, Lincoln, Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. This hour on the Steve Jones Show, we will replay interviews from earlier this year. We had a chance to speak with Peter King from theMMQB.com and Sports Illustrated prior to the Super Bowl. And then later on, to finish out the show, Phil Bourque, the old two-nighter from the Pittsburgh Penguins Radio Network, who does the games alongside Hockey Hall of Famer Mike Lang. So we'll get a chance to speak with Phil, and had a chance to do that just a couple of days after the Pittsburgh Penguins claimed their second consecutive Stanley Cup Championship. All right, Peter King on deck in just a few moments. First off, our play-by-play call of the day. Mets with some baseball history last night.
The 0-2, Reyes runs, pitch taken inside, throw to second, the slide, safe at second base. The tag of Aswahe a little bit late, and Torrens could not get the throw there in time. Jose Reyes has his 500th Major League stolen base. He's got a big smile on his face. He's hearing it from his teammates in the Mets dugout. He is the 39th player in Major League history to get to 500 career stolen bases.
Howie Rose on WOR last night. Jose Reyes with his 500th stolen base of his career. Mets went on to win that game last night over the Padres by a score of 5-3. Earlier this year, late January, prior to the Super Bowl between New England and the Atlanta Falcons, we had the wonderful opportunity to have on the show Sports Illustrated and the MMQB's Peter King.
When certain people write things, you want to read it. When they say something, you want to listen to it. One of those people for me has always been Peter King. And before we get to anything else, Peter, to Laura and Kim as parents, and to you and Ann as grandparents, congratulations on Freddie King coming into the world.
Hey, Steve, so nice of you. I really, really appreciate that. And it's great to be on with you. Obviously, in our business, I've been on the campus over there quite a few times over the years, and I've heard you, and I really admire your work. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. That's awfully nice of you to say. I want to talk with Ben Roethlisberger first. He comes out, he says what he says, and we know here's a guy that's been sacked 505 times. Phillip Rivers, 383. That's a big difference between 1 and 2 since 2004. But what was your interpretation of the message maybe he was trying to send to management or someone in that organization?
I think really you could tell. I mean, Roethlisberger isn't often Roethlisberger is pretty benign, as many players are after games, and I think he was to hear him after the Kansas City game talk about Antonio Brown in a negative light after this loss against New England to again talk about the picture kind of negatively. And then, on Tuesday, even going farther and saying he's not sure he's coming back. That says to me that, because first of all, look, I went to Pittsburgh in, I don't know, maybe late October. I did my podcast with Roethlisberger in mid-season this year, and I never forget. I asked him about his future, and he said, look, I'm going to play as long as the good Lord and Mr. Rooney are willing. And so you don't go from that to 2 months later, being in the second round of the playoffs, third round, being in the AFC Championship game, and being so disappointed in that you talk about retiring, because I just simply don't believe that he's got any intention to retire. I think what he was doing is he was saying, Antonio Brown, grow up, Mike Tomlin, get a hold of this thing, and Todd Haley, let's either call better plays or get better personnel on the field, whatever. I just think he's a little bit disillusioned with the way the thing is being run right now, and so I would expect he's going to have conversations with all those people, with the Rooneys, with Mike Tomlin, because I think that he bears his own responsibility in this, Steve. But I think the last thing you want is to have words like that from your quarterback sort of hanging over the off season.
Exactly. Now, one of the responsibilities that you'll have next week is the Hall of Fame vote. And I'm not going to ask who you're voting for. That's wrong. But take me into the room and what that's like. Because, for example, let's take a guy like Ray Guy, first punter. To some fans, that's an obvious one. But, you could sit there from our era that you and I grew up in and say, hey, look, Gerald Wilson's numbers are comparable. So take us into what it's like to null that out, to get it down to 5.
It's impossible. I was on with somebody in Phoenix this week, Steve, and they said, well, does Kurt Warner get your vote? And I said, well, that's not really the question to ask. If the question is, do I support Kurt Warner for the Hall of Fame, the answer is yes. Now, he's a very difficult case because he sort of has this big donut hole in the middle of his career. But I think he has one of the most fascinating, compelling, borderline great careers in the history of the NFL, all things considered. So, yes, I favor him going into the Hall of Fame. However, we've got 15 modern-era finalists. So the way this works is everyone's case is discussed in the room, and then the 48 voters will vote for their top 10 in that group. And then there might be a little bit more discussion, but after the 10 are announced, then we vote to get to a 5. We vote to go to 5. So the hardest decisions, far and away, are always when you have to trim from 10 to 5. Right. Because I walk in there almost every time we do this, and I've done it for 27 years. Almost every time I look at the list and I say, man, there's more than 5 Hall of Famers on this list. And so I always feel like I know maybe 1 or 2, but I don't really have a great handle on it this year. But sort of getting back to your question, I mean, if we take Warner as an example for this year, right. If you looked at if I got a final 10 list in front of me, and I picked 4 guys, and now the 5th one comes down to Kurt Warner, let's say Tony Baselli, and Brian Dawkins. That becomes the question. I might think all 3 of them are Hall of Famers, but now I got to pick one. Right. So let's say I pick Dawkins. That doesn't mean I don't think Warner is. It just means that you can pick 5, and he wasn't one of my best 5. After the vote in this meeting.
Okay, then the game will come up itself. You were at the Falcons-Packers game and wrote a compelling piece on Matt Ryan, especially the guy that had to step in after Michael Vick. What strikes you now about the maturity of the game with which Matt Ryan plays right now?
You know, he's this kind of guy who, you know, I'll give you a little scene about Matt Ryan. He's perhaps the most polite player in NFL history, and I'll tell you what I mean. I walk up to him after the game. Obviously, there's throngs of people in the locker room, and I just wait for a moment while he's still got most of his uniform on. This is, you know, I don't know, 5 minutes after he's come in from the celebration on the field. And he's sitting there, he's starting to take his stuff off, and I see him, I mean, I've known him since draft day, and I just say, hey, congratulations. And his first words are, Peter, you finally came to one of our games, man. This is great. Usually, I'm maybe talking to you on the phone during the week or whatever. He said, hey, great that you came to the game. And, you know, but that's who he is. He's polite. He notices. And so I think that what a team wants in its starting quarterback, I think they want a steadiness. And I think they want to know what they're getting every offseason, what they're getting every day. And here's a guy whose game itself has been, to me, improved 15% probably by his association with Kyle Shanahan. And so to me, I look at him, and his football is improved. But the one thing that his team has always known is that we know that this guy is going to be here before everybody else. He's going to leave after everybody else. And we know that he's always going to be uber prepared. And, you know, that was something that they never really knew with Vic. Vic was he wasn't what anybody would call a football junkie. You know, if he had a day off, he was almost always on the plane home to see his family in Virginia and to hang out in Virginia. And so, you know, he was never what you would call sort of all in. And I think that's one of the things now that the Falcons think that they're lucky to have with Matt Ryan.
Well, the guy on the other side, everybody knows. And my first exposure to him was a 1999 game here, broadcasting it here, and Penn State's up 10 with 6 minutes to go, and Tom Brady naturally rallies Michigan with 2 touchdowns last 6 minutes. I'm still recovering from the pain, but that's all right. Tom Brady, when Bill O'Brien was here for 2 years, he gave me an insight because obviously I talked to Bill a lot when he was here. And one night we're doing the coaches show together, and some fan made some offhand remark, well, Brady's a guy you didn't have to coach. And he went on to ask a question about Matt McGloin. And Bill really bristled at that. I mean, quietly, but bristled. That brings up the point of coachability. You spent a lot of time with Peyton Manning. You've been around Tom Brady. What is it about their coachability that they understand who the coach is and who the player is?
You know, we just had a story at my site, the MMQB, last week by Jenny Varentis, who's a Penn State grad, and she had a great story about the coachability of Tom Brady, and it was all about how, and the best example, you know, from that story that tells you everything you need to know about Brady is that Randy Moss's first day as a Patriot in a mini camp in 2006 or 2007 rather, Belichick is up in front of the room and he's showing video that he wanted everybody to see and some messages he wanted to send out. The first play is a play from Brady from the AFC Championship game when they lost to Indianapolis. And it was a horrible throw. It was just a bad throw by Brady. It fell incomplete. And Belichick is standing up there, and he says, hey, here's our great quarterback who's throwing the ball like Johnny Foxborough. And so Randy Moss, Dante Stallworth is the one who told this story. They're in camp, and they're looking at each other like, holy crap. Here's a guy who's won the Super Bowl 3 times, and his coach is talking to him like he's a third-string quarterback. And that's the way it is for Brady. And look, I know this is going to sound, people are going to say this is too goody two-shoes because it sounds like it. But I know Brady pretty well, and Brady wants the coaches to kill him. And he wants the coaches to tell him what he's doing wrong. And that's one of the, I'm telling you, one of the reasons why Josh McDaniels is still there is because he just thinks that he is in an incredible place at an incredible time. And you know, I think he's going to go one day when there's a good offer, maybe with a good quarterback. But in general, I think that McDaniels basically feels like, I'm 40 years old, I'll have a shot, but I'll never be able to duplicate being able every day to coach a guy like Tom Brady.
Over time, you know, you come out of school and you get into writing, you cover teams, you're around Bill Parcells at one point in your career, Peter. But over time with this, because of the changing technology and what people devour now, you've had to adapt. And you've adapted. What did it take for you to adapt, whether it was online with MMQB? What did it take for you to do that, and how easy was that?
I mean, I think, Steve, you know, I started writing this column, Monday Morning Quarterback, on this new thing that we're all getting used to called the Internet in 1997. I mean, I basically just barely knew what a website was. I basically hardly knew what the Internet was. But they asked me to write this column with whatever I had left over from my Sports Illustrated stuff for that week. So I did it. And at first it was 800 or 900 words a week. It was no big deal. And then after a while, it started to grow. And now it's, you know, it's a lot longer than that, 7,000 or 8,000 words every week. But I think one of the things in our business today is that nobody knows how the next generation of, let's say, Nittany Lions are going to consume their news, either sports news or otherwise. Are they just going to, you know, like I get up, I live in New York City, so I read a couple of papers every day, and I read the papers. I read the New York Times, and I'm reading at least one of the tabloids every day to see what's going on. And so, in essence, I'm a dinosaur. I'm 59 years old, and I'm a dinosaur, and my whole thought about this and about this whole business is, you know, our job really as journalists, as columnists, as reporters of sports news should be to try to figure out, okay, we're going to be reporters, but we also should try to figure out how people out there are going to consume the news. And so if they're going to consume it on the Internet, well, I want to write the best column on the Internet. If they're going to consume it in video, then I want to start learning, you know, the ins and outs of doing video. I remember we were going to start this in 2013, and I remember being with Roger Goodell and just telling him, hey, this is what we're doing. Goodell is a huge, you know, new media junkie. You know, he tries to figure out where the media is going. And I remember, you know, I basically am fishing around for, what do you think? What do you think is important now about the web? And he goes, I've told people at NFL Network, no videos longer than 2 minutes. I want everything short because that's what people want to consume. People do not stick with videos beyond 90 seconds or 2 minutes unless they're absolutely, totally compelling. So, you know, Steve, I'm just trying to, honestly, to learn and to track where the business is going so I can stay relevant before they kick me out of it.
Right. That's what we're all trying to do, Peter. All of us are doing that. One final question, then I'll let you go, and I really appreciate the time. And that is dealing with access. Yeah, access is so controlled. And you talked about, look, you know Brady somewhat. Yeah, everyone knows him reading it. You know Peyton Manning pretty well. How difficult is it to now try and do the job when access is so controlled?
You know, Steve, I'll tell you a story that you'll appreciate because it's about somebody from Penn State. All right, so this week on Tuesday, we had a huge story about Erin Andrews, and it was a story basically about how Erin Andrews, her first comments, detailed comments about her trial in Nashville with this guy who videotaped her through a peephole in a hotel, and in the middle of it, telling this story, you find out, wow, Erin Andrews has cervical cancer. And so you say, holy cow, that's terrible. So anyway, this story sort of exploded on Tuesday. It was everywhere. Everybody picked it up, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the woman who wrote the story is Emily Kaplan. She's 25 years old. She graduated from Penn State, I think, three and a half years ago.
Yep.
And she's been on our staff for a couple of years. She covered a lot of the late Paterno stuff when she was working for the Collegian, and so I think, and so. But anyway, my point is that is a story that anybody in the business would have wanted to have. So you ask, why did a 25-year-old kid get this story? And she got the story because she met Erin last year doing a story on how Fox does a football game. She didn't know her that well, but she met her, and got to know her a little bit. And, she got her number, kept in touch a little bit. And I woke up one day last May, Steve, and I was reading in the paper all about this stuff with this trial in Nashville, where they're trying to convict this guy for, videotaping Erin Andrews. And so it's a really emotional trial. It's on the front page of all the papers and everything. So I got in touch with Emily. I said, hey, Emily, go to Nashville and go get Erin Andrews to tell you what's going through her mind now, or go try to do this. And she couldn't do it at the time because Andrews wasn't going to talk, but she kept in touch, and she kept talking to her, and I just told her, that's your story. You have to get that story. And Emily worked at it. She probably had 15 contacts with her in the last 5 or 6 months. And so it finally got to the point where Erin agreed to tell her story through Emily, instead of telling it anywhere else. So the bottom line in this is some reporting work is still trying to babysit a story, trying to tell people why you think that we would be the best place for her to tell her story and all that. So that's kind of a good story about the journalist at Penn State, is turning out, and also just a story about the way journalists, even though, the business has changed drastically, it still is all about how, in my opinion anyway, it's still so much about the basic stuff that it's been about for a long, long time.
Peter, absolute pleasure. Appreciate it. Great respect for your work as always, and we hope to get you back again at some other time because I really enjoyed it.
Hey, happy to do it, Steve. All the best to you. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Peter King, Sports Illustrated, has carved out a great career. A great career.
And before we know it, we will get Peter King's training camp reports and his prediction for the next Super Bowl, because that has to happen before the season starts. But, of course, before training camp begins, Peter King has been on vacation over in Ireland and had a chance to see U2 over the weekend. U2 has been touring in support and in connection to the 30th anniversary of the Joshua Tree, which, of course, was in the spring of 1987 when that was released. Best of the Steve Jones Show here, News Radio 1070 WKOK. Sean Carey here for Steve Jones. And he mentioned Michael Vick in that conversation a few moments ago, since we had Peter on before this year's Super Bowl between Atlanta and the New England Patriots. And he mentioned Michael Vick, and he was talking about, how Michael Vick was, his time, how he conducted himself, during his time with the Falcons compared to Matt Ryan. Well, we just found this out a little while ago. Michael Vick is going to be joining the Kansas City Chiefs, not as a player, but as an intern, as a coach. So he is back in the NFL. Andy Reid is giving Michael Vick his first shot at coaching. And, of course, Vick played under Reid in Philadelphia from 2009 to 2012. He is now serving as one of the coaching interns for the Kansas City Chiefs. And this coming off 24 hours after the Kansas City Chiefs announcing that Mount Carmel native Brett Veach is the new general manager of Kansas City. All right, we got a local news update in just a few with Matt Catrillo, and then we'll wrap up today's Best of Steve Jones Show with the old 2-9er, Phil Bourque, color analyst for the Pittsburgh Penguins Radio Network. He's up soon on WKOK.
City blocks of new Ford trucks. Over 40,000 trucks sold. SMC is where you want to be. Sunbury Motors Ford has over 110 new Ford trucks. And during July, they'll include a complimentary accessory package with the purchase of any new F-150. Through July 31st, receive a tonneau cover, molded splash guards, and window deflectors at no additional charge. SMC is where you want to be because they have the largest selection of new Ford trucks in all of central Pennsylvania. And that means the biggest savings. Take up to $13,500 off on new F-150s. And SMC has them starting as low as $23,919. Save up to $7,000 on 2017 Ford Escapes, and they're slashed as low as $19,380. Explorers, Edges, and Expeditions have discounts up to $11,000. SMC is where you want to be in July for this mega summer spectacular sale and the complimentary F-150 accessory package. Sunbury Motors in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury. F-150 accessory package valued at $699. Excludes prior sales and ordered units.
Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
To the Steve Jones Show, News Radio 1070 WKOK. Steve enjoying a well-deserved week off. Back with us next Tuesday. Shawn Carey, we're here in the Sunbury Motors Studio. Sunbury Motors, Ford, Lincoln, Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. The old 2-9er, Phil Bourque, who's on with Hockey Hall of Famer Mike Lang on the Pittsburgh Penguins Radio Network. Had a chance to speak with him a little over a month ago after the Pittsburgh Penguins winning their back-to-back Stanley Cup Championships. So we will have Phil and Steve's conversation in a few, but first off, our sports bozo of the day. Henry Romero, he's on the El Salvador national soccer team, suspended 6 games for biting an American player last week during the Gold Cup. Romero bit U.S. forward Josie Altidore during a weird match last week. It resulted in a 2-0 win over for the USA. And it wasn't even caught during the match. CONCACAF officials had to find it on replay and levied the punishments. Another player on the El Salvador team got a 3-game suspension. And also, Romero was caught by cameras twisting Altidore's nipple later in the match on a set piece. Ball was going toward the goalie, Tim Howard, and Altidore was just the wrong place, the wrong time. But that's just conduct that, that guy should just got a flat-out straight red card. Should have been thrown out of the game. And they should have been 2 or 3 players down last week. And that game was played in Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial Field. Now, Team USA, they faced Costa Rica over the weekend and won that match 2-0, and they will go for the Gold Cup Championship tomorrow night. It is Team USA. No, they're not going to be taking on Mexico. It turns out in the other semifinal over the weekend, Jamaica, the Reggae Boys, knocked out Mexico, and you pretty much had everybody in the Rose Bowl pro-Mexico Sunday night watching that, and New York Red Bulls defender Kemar Lawrence breaking their hearts with a winner in the 88th minute. So it is Jamaica and Team USA for the Gold Cup tomorrow night, but just kind of file this away. Jamaica defeated the United States in 2015 in a Gold Cup semifinal. That was one of the more shocking defeats in the Jurgen Klinsmann era. Of course, Jurgen no longer leading the team. It is Bruce Arena back in charge. The team that's been in charge in the National Hockey League for the last 2 consecutive years, the Pittsburgh Penguins, back-to-back Stanley Cup titles, and color analyst for the Pittsburgh Penguins Radio Network was on with us last month.
Phil Bourque, the old 2-9er. Phil, it's an absolute pleasure. First time you've been with us. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I mean, there's so much to talk about with what's happened with the Penguins, and real pleasure to be on your show. Looking forward to it.
Well, let's talk about how this was done. Last year, they were able to do it by the call-ups from Scranton Wilkes-Barre that they gave them the extra depth, gave them more speed. Every team's its own entity and has its own personality. What, in the end, distinguished this team from maybe a couple of others that you've seen?
Well, I think a little more of the same. I mean, you saw the youth again shining brightly, especially Jake Gensel and the way he played. Nobody saw that coming. We heard about this kid, and we heard he was a good college player, but we had no idea that he was going to make a splash like he did, not only in the regular season, but especially in the playoffs, where a lot of young kids can come up and have, 10, 15-game blocks where they're running off adrenaline, but the reality hits them come playoff time, and this kid Gensel was not overwhelmed by the situation at all. And there's Matt Murray again. Matt Murray comes in relief of Marc-Andre Fleury after Fleury comes in relief of Matt Murray. It's just the Penguini way. You have to chuckle a little bit because you think about last year you had the HBK line and Phil Kessel was pretty consistent throughout. But this year it seemed like it was a lot more difficult. Penguins had to go through tougher opponents. More physical series, but that's the heart of a champion, to find a way. Sometimes you win ugly, but you don't get bonus points for winning ugly. A win to win.
Felt last year that you could have made an argument if you wanted for Chris Letang for the Conn Smythe. I mean, Crosby was the right choice, but I think you could have made that argument. Now they had to go through the stretch run of the regular season, Phil, and then the playoffs without him. How were the Penguins able to make up for that? One guy can't do it, so how did they make up for not having a guy who is that offensively effective with defensive skills?
Well, you're exactly right. I can't remember last time a team won the Stanley Cup without that, star defenseman, that one guy that was a game breaker. They didn't really have that guy. I mean, Justin Schultz had a couple of big moments. Ole Mata had some good games, some bad games. Brian Dumoulin and Ian Cole were the two most consistent defensemen. But the answer to your question is just with their depth, just with everybody kind of pulling up their bootstraps and giving 10% more. And I think the Penguins defensemen as a core, I think they kind of relished the fact that everybody was counting the whole team out and discounting them as NHL defensemen. But when Chris Letang went out, I don't think there was one so-called expert that said, man, I still like the Penguins' chances. I think they all said they're done. There's no way. This group of defensemen that they have just can't fill that void. Well, they filled the void very admirably. And as I mentioned, they were under duress a lot. They were plastered against the boards in the Columbus series as well as the Washington series. Maybe the Ottawa series and Nashville weren't as physical, but still demanding on that group. And, Jacques Martin, who runs the defenseman, did a really good job of just balancing everything out. You look at the minutes played, they're all right around 20 minutes. So that tells me that they trusted, whether it was a Ron Hainsey or whoever was in there as a depth defenseman, they trusted them, they played them. And I think that paid dividends at the end because nobody had to carry a heavier ball than the other guy. And I think they're damn proud of the job they did, considering everybody counted them out.
Phil, you mentioned Jacques Martin, along with Rick Tocchet, and, of course, the guy that runs it, Mike Sullivan. In order to do what they do, you have to have a real feel for this. What is it about Mike Sullivan and his feel for the game where he not only makes between-game adjustments but appears to make some in-game adjustments?
Yeah, there's not another coach in the league that can make in-game adjustments the way he can. It's just knowing your players. Part of it's just having a sixth sense, just having a gut instinct and going with that gut, so being brave enough to listen to that little voice inside your head, whether it's taking a timeout at the right time or dialing a guy down because he's not playing his best or putting a guy in the lineup or giving him more minutes, I should say, when he is going. Mike Sullivan's the best at that, as well as game-to-game adjustments that he makes. He's not afraid to change his lineup even after a win. Some coaches are just hell-bent on staying with the same guys. And you know what I think of these guys? That once he came in as the head coach, he established a certain standard. And I think especially with the star players, this is the way it's going to be. That you're not going to be easy to play against. Teams are not going to be able to push your buttons. You're not going to be undisciplined like you were in the past and do it your way. I know your way won for you in 2009, but you had some pretty bad series against Philadelphia, against Boston, because you were trying to do it your way. We're going to do it my way. And he didn't really care if he got fired or not doing it, because he knew the team would win. And that conviction that he had, as well as being an outstanding communicator, I think it went a long way with the star players, which usually trickles down to the rest of the boys.
You mentioned the star players. I've always felt that in the biggest games, the biggest moments, your stars have to be your stars. What has allowed Crosby and Malkin to continue to thrive despite the fact that they get incredible attention every time they step on the ice?
Because it's Crosby and Malkin. It's not just Crosby or just Malkin.
Right. Good point. Good point.
Yeah, the teams, they feed off of that. They realize that there aren't many teams, if any team, that can shut down both of them. That you can load up and probably feel good about yourself that, hey, we shut down Sid tonight, and then Gino kills you. We shut down Gino, Sid kills you. And if you have the amazing night, almost a perfect night, and you shut both of them down, then maybe it's a Sheary or a Bonino or somebody like that, or a Kunitz, or somebody is dinging you, and you're like, and that's demoralizing. And I think that's why the Penguins have won 8 straight series over the last 2 years is the depth. And I think that takes the pressure off Crosby and Malkin, that going into specific games, they don't feel like, I have to score, I have to score, I have to score, I have to be the guy. They realize if the team's going to win, they have to play their best. They realize they have to put up points. They realize all that. But that's not perfect. That's just the expectations they have of themselves. But I think in years past, they may be overwhelmed by the pressure and the responsibility that they had to be the guys. They don't have to be the guys every single night. Most nights they do if you want to win a Stanley Cup. But to know that if I have a bad night, somebody else can win the game for us has to be quite refreshing.
You understand the grind of the regular season, and you understand the grind of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Explain to all of us mentally what it takes to somehow negotiate all of that.
Yeah, well, the best way for me to explain it to you in a short few words is it's the most difficult thing I ever did in my life, but also the most satisfying.
Right.
And what does that mean? As physically demanding it is, because you test yourself in ways nothing else in this world. There isn't another job on the planet that will test you physically like the Stanley Cup playoffs, because it's pretty much every single night. That you battle through pain, that you really don't know when you wake up in the morning how you are going to play a hockey game. But somehow you find something in the middle of your core that gets you through it and is able to subside that pain for 2.5 hours or whatever it is. That's the physical part. Equally as tough is the mental and the emotional part, because your concentration has to be so on point for every second. The emotional part is the stress, the outside distractions, the media, maybe pumping your tires, getting you too high, or if you have a bad game, they're ripping you and you're down too low. So there's that emotional part. But you add in the physical, the mental, and the emotional. It's even when you're asleep in a dead sleep with the REM going, the whole thing, you're still thinking about the game. You're still thinking about your responsibilities. That's incredibly taxing physically and just wears you out. That's why when you see guys raise the Stanley Cup, they barely have enough strength to put 35 pounds of silver over your head, because you're just completely drained and exhausted.
And there was also the addition this year of the grind of playing the World Cup of Hockey. So it was the additional month. The Penguin players did not have a lot of time off between the end of last season. Then they had to play the World Cup of Hockey, then play the regular season, then play the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I understand that, but especially if you're a guy like Sid Crosby and you're winning those tournaments and you're winning Stanley Cups, that's energizing. You're not winning or losing triple overtime games where it just knocks the stuffing out of you like you got sucker punched. Sid is well conditioned enough. He gets his rest. He lives his life the right way. He's not out abusing his body at nights. So I think that because of that, and a lot of other guys in the team are like that I don't think this is as taxing as we all think it is. I think that they're energized by it, they're driven by it, and like I said, This is a team that's built off of depth, so nobody has to carry that much heavier load than anybody else. And I think that's why this team is so fresh. And also, they've got a coach that is really good at the work-to-rest ratio.
You know how to work with teammates. What's it been like working with a teammate like Mike Lang?
The best. Absolutely the best. I love the guy. Like, he's family. I've said this before, one of my biggest regrets as a player is not taking the time to get to know Mike Lang, the broadcaster. I was so worried about myself and just kind of, did my own thing. I mean, Mikey and I interacted, but not as much as we do now. I call him all the time. We go out for beers. We go down to the casino and we have a little fun. I mean, we just have so much in common, mutual respect for each other. He pushes me. I push him in a healthy way. And the way he calls a game is an absolute treat. There's times where I catch myself, just getting kind of daydreaming and just kind of listening to him and not really watching the game because I just think he's the best in the game. And, I'll be honest with you, who knows how much longer we're going to have with him. He's starting to get up there in age and, his health isn't the best, but, I think we should just kind of thank our lucky stars that we have a Mike Lang to listen to because he is the best in the game and who knows how much longer we're going to have him.
Good points, and he is the best in the game. I want to ask you just very quickly, each team brings its own entity, its own personality, because personnel changes. And personnel's about to change again because the expansion draft is coming up. So I want to ask you, as somebody who's been around to every market, how interested are you about the Las Vegas, quote, experiment?
I'm very interested. I think they're going to have a good team. I think a lot of people are thinking they're not going to have a good team, and it sure does seem like Marc-Andre Fleury is going there, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to stay there. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Vegas took him in the draft, in the expansion draft, and then possibly moved him for something more. I think there'll be a lot of goaltenders available, pretty good goaltenders, and I think they'll have a good team. I think if they do have Marc-Andre Fleury in net, I wouldn't be shocked if they made it to the playoffs their first year, obviously as a 7th or 8th seed, but I think they're going to have a pretty good team. I think a lot of people are discounting them. I think there's going to be good players available because of the salary cap and the situation and the parameters of the expansion draft. And so I think that it's going to be really interesting when the list comes out. I think some players might be a little bit chafed, if you know what I mean, if they're on that list to be taken. But, hey, that's sports. That's pro sports. That's why you're compensated so handsomely is because of situations like this where, sometimes life's not fair. Sometimes pro sports aren't fair, but that's the way things go. But there'll be changes for the Penguins. Hopefully not too many. Pretty sure Matt Cullen's going to retire. I don't want to lose Nick Bonino. But guys like Trevor Daley, Ron Hainsey, who knows, maybe Chris Kunitz could all be gone come September.
Phil, an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate the time and the insight as well. We enjoyed it very, very much.
Yeah, likewise. I enjoyed it, too. Anytime we could talk Penguins hockey, I enjoy it. Anytime you need me, call me back, and this was Good Hockey Talk.